As I explained before, in the first session, we were trying to analyse problems present data science. Now we're coming towards what we think are the solutions. Again, it'll be Buick will be opening up for the World Socialist Movement on our left, and Steve will also be speaking on afterwards on behalf of the Zeitgeist Movement. Well, just one thing before we start. We've got a mailing list there, which I don't know if you've been able to circulate it. Yeah, you can circulate it for anybody who wants to be informed of future meetings of the Socialist Party, the WSM. Please leave address, email address, whatever, phone number. Okay, so without further ado, I'll ask Adam to open up.
Well, I mean, the formal title is how do we get to a society where money isn't legal? Actually, we've already begun the discussion in the first half of some aspects of this. But the first thing to realise is just how radical and far-reaching change would be involved in getting to a society where money isn't needed. After all, why do we need money today? Well, basically, we need it because we're living in a society where the economic system is based on buying and selling. Goods and services, they're produced to be sold on a market. And where you have a buying and selling economy, an exchange economy, you have to have a means of exchange, and that's what money is. And the money is a necessary product of a society where goods and services are produced to be exchanged on the market. But an exchange economy implies something more than this. It implies that there are separate owners of the things that are exchanged. After all, if you own something or you're joint owner of something, you don't exchange it. You don't sell it for money. For instance, in the family, it's simply distributed according to needs. So exchange, the very fact that there is buying and selling, implies that there is private property, not just of the things that are bought and sold, but also of the places where these things are produced. And this is why the change to a society where you wouldn't need money has to be so far-reaching and so radical. It implies the abolition, the end of private property. And I'm not talking about people's clothes or toothbrushes and things like that. What I'm talking about is private property rights over the places where wealth is produced, where useful goods are produced, and where useful services are provided. I'm talking about things like farms, factories, railways, hospitals, schools, and the like. These will no longer be the private property of rich individuals, whether they are owned as individuals or as shareholders in a capitalist corporation, or even through the state. So, in a society without money, or a society where money wouldn't be needed, who would own these things, or these places where wealth is produced? The answer is everybody and nobody. I mean, nobody would be able to exercise private property rights over any of these places where wealth is produced. I mean, it would become the common heritage of everybody to be used in accordance with the rules the community lays down. Now, we in the World Socialist Movement, we call this socialism or World Socialism in the TZM movement, or the Zeitgeist Movement. They call it resource-based economy, but basically it's the same thing. Now, this change that we're talking about, well, it's described here in this Zeitgeist leaflet as a 360-degree change. Well, what is a 360-degree change? It's a revolution. So I can understand why people are reluctant to talk about revolution, because in many people's minds it conjures up the idea of street battles, public execution, sort of things going on in Syria at the present time. But what we're talking about is a revolution in the basis of society. We're talking about a social revolution, irrespective of how this is brought about. So how would this change in the base of society from minority ownership of the means of production to these becoming the common heritage? How would this be? How would this be brought about? Now, we in the World Socialist Movement have got two basic principles on this. First, that it has to be a majority of people in favour of it. In other words, it's not something that can be imposed from above by a minority or an elite, however benevolent that minority or that elite might be. And the second principle is that it can't evolve gradually out of present-day society. In other words, it has to involve at some point a more or less rapid, radical break between capitalism and the new society. And as this second point is perhaps the most difficult to get over, I'll start with that. And why cannot there be a gradual transition to a money-free society? Why couldn't we, for instance, start with a free national health service and then move on to a free public transport system, then have free telephones, free internet connection, free utilities, water, electricity, gas, and so on. So eventually you reach a stage where everything is available free without having to pay money or without having to use money. I mean, this, believe it or not, was what lay behind some of the thinkers in the early Labour Party. Of course, it's not the case anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. Now, why wouldn't this work? In fact, why didn't this work? Because, well, basically, because as Dick was explaining, capitalism is a single integrated system which works according to certain economic rules or economic laws, which say this is a profit-making system. Capitalism runs on profits. Capitalism is driven by profits, and it can only work as a profit-making system. And as Dick also explained, this means that there is competition between capitalist corporations, and one of the weapons of this battle of competition between them is keeping costs down. So there's a competition to cut costs. Now, everything has a monetary cost. Everything has to be accounted for in money terms. I mean, as they say, there is no such thing as a free lunch. I mean, free lunches have to be paid for, in the end, out of profits. In fact, this doesn't just apply to free lunches, it applies to everything that's free. If you had a free public transport system or a free health service, this can only exist by subsidies. And subsidies can only come from taxes, and taxes fall in the end on profits. So if in fact you increase taxes, or the government was to increase taxes too much, it would reduce the amount of profits until the incentive to reduce it could bring about a decline in economic activity. So whenever, if this situation is threatened, what happens is governments eventually back down and they agree that to give priority to profits and profit making. Of course, when activity slows down, as has done at the present time, those who live off profits, they say, look, you must reduce taxation, you must allow us to make more profits, and the governments comply. And that's why we have increased austerity at the present time. So what in fact, we're not talking about extending the sphere of free goods and services. In fact, over the last 40 or 50 years, the trend has been in the opposite direction. What free services did exist have been whittled away, and money and buying and selling relations have been introduced into more and more fields of human activity. In other words, what's happened is that the logic of capitalism has won out as it was bound to. In fact, we'll put it this way: you can't kill the capitalist tiger by taking out one tooth at a time. The beast has to be killed in one go. Now, another theory of government action to sort of have a gradual evolution towards a money-free society is one, frankly, I just can't understand. And this is that the government intervenes to bring about what we discussed this morning. I'm going to provoke another round two of that. The government intervenes to bring about monetary and banking reform. But as I said, I don't see the logic of this. How can monetary reform lead to a money-free society? I mean, I know this theory is based on the idea that there's some flaw in the monetary system or the banking system. But as we all know well now, we don't accept that it is a flaw. But supposing that there was a flaw, how could, what if you did get rid of that flaw? Wouldn't you be strengthening, wouldn't you be maintaining the monetary system? How could it be a step towards a money-free society? Now there's a third proposed way in which you could gradually get to a money-free society, and that, unlike the other two that I've mentioned, this is not based on trying to get the government to do something. It's not based on trying to reform the system. It's based on people getting together in communes, cooperatives, let schemes and so on, which wouldn't use money internally, but would gradually spread and would out-compete the big capitalist corporations. But I think merely to state this is to show that it's not going to work, because if governments cannot bend capital to the will, what chance is there that small-scale voluntary associations will be able to do this? So, as I said, there is no gradual road to a society which doesn't need money. There has to be, as I said, a decisive, radical break between capitalism and the new society. It has to be a revolution. That's it, a social revolution. Now, how can this be brought about? And this brings us to the first principle that I mentioned, that there must be majority support, majority in favour of the change. In fact, there must be more than simple support and being in favour. What there must be is participation as well. And the reason for this is that in this future society, there's not going to be any government over people. There's not going to be any state machine to force people to behave in a particular way, which means that it's going to rely to a large extent on people voluntarily cooperating to make the system work, from which it follows that there must be the people that are going to establish this society must also recognise this and organise on that basis. Now, suppose that we've got this sufficient majority, suppose that we've got the necessary critical mass. What then? What is the most intelligent way for those who want a money-free society to proceed? Well, basically, there's the hard way and the not-so-hard way. Well, the first would be to try to bypass or ignore the state machine by setting up parallel structures, by taking over and trying to run factories and that sort of thing. I suggest this is the hard way. I mean, it might work, because once you've got a majority, that majority is going to get its way one way or the other, whatever it decides to do. So that's the hard way. Now, the not so hard way is, I suggest, is the direct way. That is to win control of the state machine and the government, and to use it to abolish capitalism. So we in the World Socialist Movement, we favour the second. Now, we realise that this involves taking political action. And we're also aware, of course, that to many people, politics is a dirty word, and certainly politics, as we know it, is a dirty business. But we're not talking about that kind of politics. We're not talking about professional politicians or bands of professional politicians, getting together and making promises to do things for people, and when they get into power, finding that they can't honour these promises because they don't control the way capitalism works. What we're talking about is people organising themselves to achieve a common aim in their common interest. Now, this will involve contesting elections. In fact, we do contest elections. Mainly at the present time, this is sort of a gesture to show that we think this is the way. There's also a publicity exercise. But when we contest elections, we don't go before the people and say, look, offer ourselves as leaders or make any promises to do things for people. All we do is offer ourselves. People can register that they want a change in society, that they reject capitalism and want a money-free society. In fact, on the table over there are some examples of our election leaflets. But in the future, when we're talking about a mass movement, for a money-free society, this will be a serious attempt or serious struggle to gain control of the government machine. It will be a struggle. I think we have both agreed that there is an elite, there is a minority, which at present dominates society and benefit from it. I mean, the Occupy movement, exaggerated perhaps, well, not exaggerated anyway, so talking about 99% versus the 1%, but there is anyway a small, tiny minority of the population who benefit from the present system. At the present time, they control the government machine. So we've got to take that out of their hands. I think someone there explained this in the first session. I mean, you can't ignore the state. If you try to bypass it, it won't let you. What will happen will be that those who control it will use it to impede the movement and to try to derail the movement. So you have to contest. There was a big discussion, shouts, vote, how stupid and so on. But when you think about it, if you've already got a majority of people who are in favour of this change, this can easily reflect itself in an electoral victory and a parliament majority. I'm not talking here about forming a socialist government or forming a government of any sort. Just talking about using the machine of government to coordinate the change. And what would happen, I would think, would be that once you get a majority in favour, majority in Parliament, they'll say, look, from now on, all private property rights are null and void. All bills and bonds, all stocks and shares, they're worthless pieces of paper. From now on, the places where wealth is produced, they are the common heritage of all the people. And that's how we envisage getting to a society which money wouldn't be needed. Now, people keep passing me notes, and it says, could you wind up? That's just it.
Thank you much, Adam, for the illuminating talk. Now I'll pass you over to Steve Buffield.
Zeitgeist Movement.